Bam! What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep diving, having a good time while doing it. I'm here usually for about an hour, sometimes a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. Today we have a pretty good topic. Before we get into that, let me take care of the housekeeping. If you guys are watching on either the Master Chim official YouTube page or one of my Facebook pages, you'll notice in the description there's a bunch of relevant links to me and my stuff. I would say primarily if you guys are not getting my emails in the morning, then you have to square that away. You can go to masterchimletter.com. The link is in the description. But every morning I send an email, and I get a lot of good feedback from them. And I don't only get good feedback. Sometimes the wrong guy winds up on the email list, and shit goes a little sideways. But if you've seen my stuff and you are interested in what I talk about and what I say resonates with what you like to hear, then absolutely get on that email list. Link in the description. All right. So as you guys are popping on, do me a favor, give me a shout so far. Judge Cohen, what's up, brother, man? Jesse, good to see you. Aaron, good to see you. Jamie, my couple from Canada, holding it down north of the border. Hope all is well. I got a pretty interesting topic planned for today. And as usual, when designing the thumbnail this morning, I was having, more of a good time than I probably should have. A lot of times, truth be told, I have an idea of what I want to talk about, and I just start using AI to create thumbnails. And I wait until one of the thumbnails really clicks with me, and it's like, yep, this thumbnail is the one. And it usually finishes the sort of last 10 to 20% of what the topic is going to be for the day. Today, I put in a bunch of prompts. I was using Midjourney, and it was the prompts were like warrior at bus stop in the city, and things to that effect. And eventually, I got the one that you guys saw, and it's exactly what I wanted it to be. The topic for today is the weakness of being normal. And as is usually the case with me, I want to first define terms. And starting off with the weakness, the weakness is, as I've described before, the rejection of the pursuit of power. It's not the deficiency of power in and of itself. It's not the state of being imperfect. It's not that there are things or people that are stronger than you, therefore you are assigned the weak label in contrast to them. That's not it at all. In my philosophy, I preface everything by saying we all have a ladder to climb. And the ladder represents our growth. It's really the acquisition of power. Power is both internal and external. There's a priority where those are concerned, internal obviously being at the top of that priority list. But the acquisition of power I represent in my philosophy through the metaphor of climbing the ladder. When somebody is weak, they are somebody who refuses to climb. Worst yet, there's somebody who condemns or mocks those climbing. And the sort of delta, the difference between their position and who they would have to be, where they would have to be on the ladder climbing themselves, that is the weakness that individual possesses. Next, the idea of being. Being is an act, is an action. The state of being is something that lends itself to a little bit more of an ambiguous understanding. If we're trying to figure out exactly what that word's, being is different from running. It's different from throwing, different from, jumping. But being is a verb just the same. And it's something that denotes action. And how I would apply it to this use for today It is what it is that you are continuously do. The collection of that is your approach to being. There was a point where, and I think in Tribalnomics in the book, I used the verb selfing. Whatever it is that you do to be you is the total collection of your selfing rituals. Alan Watts uses the term I-ing, as in I, first person, the act, or the action of being me. He calls it I-ing. I just think selfing has a better ring to it. Alan Watts is one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite speakers to listen to, but I don't know how much copywriting he was doing, because I-ing is not as good as selfing. But I digress. So weakness we've covered, being we've covered. Now normal. Normal is something that I think, in this information / post-information world, a lot of concepts that have deviated from their origins are being reclaimed. Sometimes they're being designated as having, multiple definitions. But normal, first and foremost, is a commentary, as I'm using, as a commentary on distribution. Distribution is it's a math assessment. It is the zone where the commonality of a group exists, right? If you guys have ever seen the normal curve, the bell curve, I'm not going to get into standard deviations and how that correlates to different percentages of the distributed, set of whatever. But let's just say it's the middle of the group in whatever faculty, whatever action that or attribute we're measuring them by in a given assessment. So to be normal in a thing is to be the most like the most people, right? The weakness of being normal. Given those definitions, now we could say that the weakness of being normal is the distance between who we are and being on our ladder of power as measured or produced by the actions we take to overlap with the group. It is we could say the deficiency of one's pursuit of power because of the distraction of the pursuit of acceptance. A lot of people enjoy being like other people. A lot of people enjoy being like other people. Not many people like the spotlight. Not many people like the attention. Not many people like the pressure of standing out, of being the anomaly. You look at the way animals, use the peripheral vision in the wild to identify predators, identify prey for that matter. A lot of what they do can be described as tracking anomalies. Well, there's something to be said for, who is the individual, or why does the individual look to not ever be an anomaly? Predators only worry about being an anomaly when they're stalking something, right? So there's certainly a mission-based, purpose or utility to disappearing in the environment during the hunt. But as a standard default way of being, well, you'd have to be prey to identify, or at least direct the outcome of your actions toward not being anomalous. So the problem with pursuing, not being an anomaly, is you are allowing, let's get to the core of it, the heart of the issue right here. You are allowing other people to determine who you are. And you could say, well, I'm just trying to get along. I'm just trying to, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to any of the other useless fucking euphemisms. I listed a couple in the email this morning. You could be that guy, but when it comes down to it, if in order to avoid being an anomaly, you are conducting yourself under those terms, under that criteria, then that is functionally who you are being. Remember, I said the weakness of being normal, being action, rituals, every day engaging these rituals just to fit in, just to overlap with the norm. So the primary issue with that is you're allowing other people to determine who you are. Now, some people will push back and say, well, what is inherently wrong with allowing other people to determine who I am? And I would say, well, I'm not even going to put a value judgment on it. I'm certainly not going to paint it with some moral brush. What I will say is, so long as, I will absolutely accept that position, so long as you are congruent in the philosophy that position represents. You see, a lot of people in today's society, have evolved their rituals, have evolved their selfing formulas, based on a perspective that has been thoroughly biased and tainted by the surplus that we all enjoy. I was talking with my mastermind group this morning, my inner circle guys, and I brought up the point of how gratitude is something that escapes an individual who is so easily pleased, who is so easily entertained. And one of the costs, one of the consequences of being inundated with customized entertainment during our day is that we lose sight of what we should be grateful for. Two guys find a $20 bill on the street. One of the guys is starving. One of the guys doesn't know how he's going to get his next meal. Maybe hasn't eaten in over a day. He looks at that $20 bill. The other guy got plenty of money in the bank. He's got multiple cars, do what he wants. He's got people to get him what he wants. Doesn't have a care in the world. He sees the $20 bill. Now, to objectively assess the value of that $20 bill, sometimes we lose the essence of the contrast by saying, well, it's $20 for him and it's $20 for him. Because we're using this disconnected value system, this metric system, that says, well, it's the same value to each person. When painting the picture as I just have, we know that the scenario is different between the two. We know that to the guy who's starving, that $20 is worth more than to the guy who is the opposite of starving. So one of the symptoms of surplus in the aquarium that is our modern society is that we are inundated with customized experiences. And one of the costs of being in that situation is that we lose sight of the gratitude for the things that we have. We see this with children a lot. You'll see children who, they will, and I was one of these children, by the way. My parents worked awfully hard to provide for my younger brother and myself. And there was this one, Christmas, growing up, we celebrated Christmas, and Christmas morning, my parents were still sleeping. And my brother and I wake up super early. I had to be 7. He was probably 4. No, I wasn't 7. I was probably 6. He was like 4, thereabouts. And we woke up, all the presents under the tree. We opened everything. Everything was out. And already by the time my parents woke up, we had broken pieces, lost pieces. We just two maniacs. And I remember how upset my parents were when they got up. It wasn't until years later that I realized just how much they sacrificed to make sure that particular Christmas under the tree was filled with gifts. It's one of the telltale signs of strong parents, that the kids have no idea of what the parents are going through to make sure that everything stays safe, everything stays consistent. But they did just that. And the one thing I could say that I did not have growing up was gratitude for everything that I did have. I also, obviously worth mentioning, if it wasn't already implied, I also never starved. I also never went without clothes. I never went without a home. I never went without the ability to contact or be connected with my parents, and all of these things, they become absorbed to a young mind, to the point where they're just expected. Well, kids, they can afford to have, that relationship with their reality. It's part of being nurtured. It's part of building up the individual, building up and forging the identity of an individual so that they believe in themselves when they start exposing themselves to the outside world. And the outside world is trying to give them every reason to logically not believe in themselves. It's important to let a kid be confident, and sort of disconnect him from that real world, you know, causal relationship with actions and reactions. It's important for a kid, but as an adult, we have grown-ass men and women doing that today who are completely disconnected. So what's the point of this observation? Not that the observation being made isn't value in and of itself, but if we're looking at individuals who have created a relationship with reality that has effectively removed gratitude because of the expectations that they have for their circumstances, at some point, if they were to dedicate some time to self-reflection, they would realize that they have dedicated their identity to molding itself to becoming normal. You are only going to suffer a consequence if you're going against the grain. In an artificial society like we have, every society is artificial, obviously, but ours in particular, which I call the aquarium, in an aquarium like ours, you are rewarded for going along with the norm. Why? Because of the surplus of resources, those people that are in control are always going to reward and therefore incentivize normal behavior. Just do what we're telling you to do. Just do what everybody else is doing, and you'll be taken care of. The problem with that is that at no point in designing that type of life and designing that type of relationship with the surplus of resources that aquariums represent, at no point do we actually do the work necessary to figure out who we're supposed to be, who we arguably already are. We can't even acknowledge where that outcome is, let alone plot a course from here to there. One of the things that happens with people in well-paying jobs that require them to be somebody that is offset from who they are, there's a cost to having to pretend to be somebody else every day for 8 to 10 hours a day, if not more. There's a cost of doing a job that is so far on the opposite side of what you prefer doing that the resources, the energy that it costs to participate in it is very hard to replenish. I believe in the strategy or the utility of monk mode, right? Of locking in for a spell, of going on an arc, right? All of these different terms that the internet has for a focused mission-based, section of time. I believe in that. I believe in that the way that I believe in training 10 weeks for a fight. Everything goes on the back burner because you have this level of focus that is going to allow you to achieve a certain depth of relationship in this given thing that you would not have been able to achieve otherwise. I believe in doing that. But there's always a return to balance. It's not sustainable. Well, some people take on jobs, and these jobs are so offset from who they are that it's like they're in a fucking 5-year fight camp. There's never an end to it. It's just this perennial struggle. So what do these people tend to do? These people tend to start using the outcome, the benefit of being in that situation, usually money, and they start placating themselves. They start creating these cathartic, rituals to coincide or to exist next to those offset jobs, those offset relationships that they have. They become the guy who hates his job, hates his boss, hates going to work every day, that buys the $100,000 car that he could drive on the weekends. Now, if they didn't have that job, they wouldn't be able to afford that car. But they won't just leave the job. They won't just say, well, I don't need that fucking car anyway. I just bought that car to help me deal with this job. They won't do that because of their addiction to being normal. I have to get that job. I have to keep that job. Why? Because it's a good job. Why is it a good job? Because look at all the money I make. What does the money matter? Well, look at the fancy car I have. I wouldn't be able to afford that car if I didn't have this job. To which I would argue, you wouldn't need that car if you didn't have that job. When you're designing a goal, a mission that is captured in an identity, the one thing you don't do is allow people outside to determine the trajectory of your efforts. Nobody gets to decide who I am. Every alliance that I have is a negotiation. If I'm driving in my car and the light turns red, I stop. Why? Because that was the negotiation. At no point do I tell myself I couldn't run that red light if I wanted to. Somebody tells you, or somebody in a position of authority tells you to do something. If you do it, it's because you've decided to do it, and that was the negotiation. But maintaining that relationship with the decisions we make day to day allows us to at least hold on to the idea that it's up to us to determine who we are. I coined the phrase, the employee mindset, being the individual who shows up every day making sure he doesn't get fired. The employee mindset is the exact opposite of the individual who defines his actions, determines his actions by his relationship with his goals that exist at an individual level. I got fired from just about every job I ever had. There's one job I technically didn't get fired from because they sold the company, right? And the new company wasn't going to keep me on. So maybe that's getting fired also, but that was the one time where my boss didn't tell me, get the fuck out of here, in so many words. But every other position that I was in, it was always me just getting to the point where who I had to be in order to be true to myself was no longer congruent with who they needed to be, me to be as an employee. But I never determined who I was going to be based on what they needed me to be as an employee. It worked while it was working. But as soon as it stopped working, I stopped working it. Because I'm the only one that determines the trajectory of my efforts, my mission, my goal. There's some things you could always count on me for because they are embedded in who I am as an individual. To this day, and I'm 49 years old, to this day, I have never bailed on one of my friends. There's never been somebody that was connected to me that really needed me. And through selfish means, cowardice, some other reason, I just bailed on. It's not what I do. It's not what my younger brother does. It's not what my father did. It's not how we were raised. So if you want to count on me in a way that transcends the security of an agreement that I make, you have to pay attention to who I am. Because you could always expect me to be me. By contrast, if you have somebody that is great in great situations and terrible in terrible situations, the uneducated, the uninitiated will say, oh, we just gotta, we could just use them when the situation's great. Whereas the people who have been around the block, men of action, Princess Bride quote reference, men of action will know that this individual is more than one individual. And at no point will we ever know which one is showing up. to fulfill the obligation of the alliance that we're making with them. There are some men out there that are just weak and cowardly and scared and fearful. Some of those men are easier to respect than the people who are great in great situations and terrible in terrible ones. Because at least the pussies we know are going to show up and be a pussy. So we never give them more than a pussy's worth of work. This analogy is going in a different direction. It wasn't my intention. So we'll just put that down, set it aside. So the idea is, as an individual, if you're somebody who aspires to be normal, how then can you ever be respectable? The only way you could be respectable, to answer my own question, is if who you are is exactly overlapped with who the group is in a normal sense. But then it begs the question, what happens to you then when the group changes direction? When the group, when the what is normal, right? And a tool we could use, a mechanism we could use to describe this change is what most people are aware of now, the concept of the Overton window. What is currently politically acceptable on a large scale, a societal level scale. Well, what happens when that changes? We've seen examples of that over the last couple of years. You've seen people who were traditionally left of center, now part of the, Republican establishment, because they realized that the line moved, the line shifted. And in order to maintain a consistency of who they are, they just define themselves by the current state of definitions. But they themselves didn't change. I'm not using names on purpose because this is conceptual. I don't want to reduce this to some political fucking argument. It's a waste of time. It really comes down to, are you somebody that follows your own North Star? And if you are, and you happen to find yourself in the spectrum or within the bookends of what is considered to be normal, I would just say, understand that that is temporary opposition at best. One of my biggest peeves with allies in the past was a reluctance to take on risk. They would really want the things that they would share that they wanted. I believe that the desire was there. But then it just begs the question, if you're not willing to do the things that somebody who has acquired those things has done, what would ever lead you to believe that you would ever have them yourself? A lot of guys, and I'll use this to illustrate that the point I'm making. I've had a lot of guys come up to me over the years, and say, I want to fight MMA. It's like, okay, if you want to fight MMA, I want you to fight MMA. And now there's amateur fights. It's not like everyone's going to make it to the UFC. And in their defense, most of the people don't even have those types of aspirations. They just want to give it a shot. And I could respect that. But then at some point, I reveal to them what the work looks like. Okay, this is what you're going to have to do. This is how much you're going to have to train. This is how much you're going to have support. This is how much you're going to have to do on your own. MMA for me was always the application of a legacy. I've never wanted to be rich, being an MMA fighter or an MMA coach, because to me, it's always about the individual. I want to be around men who want to forge themselves into people they never thought they could possibly be. I want to be part of that process. I don't give a fuck about the money. So when you start exposing people to these types of things, a lot of times they go back and they go, turns out this isn't for me. And a lot of times, I will say, I think truthfully that is the norm, right? When people opt out of that request, they're exposed to what that request actually looks like on the other side of it. and they say, you know what, that's not for me. Turns out I don't want to fight MMA. It's a good way to put it. But then you'll have other people who they'll say, well, you just don't want me to fight MMA. You said you did, but it turns out you don't. Because they thought they were going to continue to be who they've always been. They thought they could have something different, something new, without doing anything new and anything different. And that's just not the way it works. Whenever people would complain about hard training, I would say, well, nobody fucking kidnapped you to be here. Right? What's the cliche, the meme? Everybody wants to be a warrior until it's time to do warrior shit. And however many iterations of that, you could make in your given application. But the idea of it is, if you really want to do the thing or be the thing, you have to do the thing. And most people can't do that if they become addicted to being normal. Because here's the thing. The point that I'm making is, when you ask people what they want, the overwhelming majority, especially men, the overwhelming majority of men will cite something that exists outside of the rituals of the average people. Everybody wants something extraordinary, but they only want to do ordinary shit to get there. And that inconsistency is something that a man needs to resolve with himself. One of the primary values I have as a coach in my one-on-one clients is going through that process of saying goals and being goals and the offset between the two. If you're going to talk about it, be about it. And if you can't, then maybe you should start talking in a way that's congruent with the way that you're being. I don't care which is driving the other, but the first concern I have with people that I work with in my coaching is just make sure that they match. When I look at individuals who are trying to get to the point where they could achieve something beyond their level of comfort, another observation that I make is so much of that is determined by people who are disconnected to them, disconnected from their identity, from their tribe. They're listening to people who don't know them. And they're taking the input from these disconnected identities and treating it like counsel, treating it like there is some transcendent voice speaking to them about their purpose. And it's something that in society is going to become more and more normalized. When I see people in public doing what you just know is like social media content, and it's like, some 30-somethings parents or husband and wife, and maybe they're performing, or it's some like college-age kid that's being obnoxious in a store while his friend's recording him and stuff like that. I'm disgusted by this. I'm disgusted that so many of these people will not only look to entertain strangers, but when you look at the overwhelming majority of them, the only feedback they get is the social approval of the strangers. I'll be the first one to tell you, you got, a wife and you got kids and you make some stupid fucking videos and you got a bunch of people that you wind up feeding your family from these stupid fucking videos. Listen, there are worse ways to make $1. There are worse ways to feed your family. But the average individual, they look at it as the type of acceptance that we all should be looking to earn. I don't know about you guys, but I've heard seen way too many videos of parents. Let me tell you a specific video. Hopefully he's not watching. Although if he is, this will be even more entertaining for me. One showed me a video of his son lip syncing to a song. His son had to be 4 or 5 years old. Cute kid. But he was showing me an online video that he and his wife had posted of their son lip syncing to the song. And I remember looking at him and going, like, are you fucking retarded? Like, why is your son doing this on a fucking video that's online? Who the fuck are you sending this to? What do you like? Did you just have your son do this to put it online so people will tell you how great you guys are? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's like you want me to send you a fucking a star? You know, I'll send you a star in a paper and say good job, and I'll mail it to you. I'll mail you once a week if you need it. But what the fuck are you doing? And I remember his reaction. That wasn't a quote for quote, verbatim reaction, but it was certainly similar. And I remember his reaction to me responding like that, just being complete disbelief. Like he didn't get it. He didn't get why I didn't go along like everybody else. Now, don't get me wrong. Let's pull back out of this for a second. Just about all of this is inevitable. Just about all of the society level reactions and evolution based on what's being incentivized through technological advancement, it's inevitable. But again, we have to continue to define ourselves by criteria that is determined by us and our people. If we look to society and say, more or less, let me know who I'm supposed to be and I'll act accordingly, then we are always going to be controlled and we are going to reduce the essence of what it means to have all of the tools that are inherent in every man when he's born. Which again, then I guess it begs the question, so who cares? Who cares? And if me saying all this, if your response is, like, what's the big deal? Like, who cares? So I do this, so I do that. It's like, then you're exactly where you should be. There are plenty of people who understand what I'm saying. There are plenty of people that are nodding their head as I'm talking and like, you get it. And those are the people that I'm talking to. The other people really doesn't matter anyway. One of my guys on the call this morning said that when he was younger, he used to be very connected to football, like watching football, and he's one of the sports. He's one of those guys, and he said now, and he's older now. He's in his 60s. He said now he can't recall the last time that's been a part of his life. Not that he cited, that he had seen a friend not too long ago, and in that particular day there was a game, and he was able to enjoy observing that game with his friend, and it's like, yeah, but then as soon as that's done, it's done. I used to play pool with my friends growing up, right? I was never any good, but we'd go to a pool hall, we played pool for a couple hours, and then we go do something else. I was able to enjoy it when we were there. But at no point did I leave there going, okay, who are the best pool players and who is this? And I want to be a fan of this person, having a shirt with some pool player on it, right? Like there's a point where there's a point of diminishing returns, I guess I'll say plainly. All right, let me see what we got going on over here in the comments. All right, Corey, what's up? Johnny Groove, what's up? Aaron says, reminds me of the part in yesterday's email. There are many modern pressures to assimilate due to the management of resources and the control of power. That's right. That's right. And she's referring to my email, which you all should be getting, link in the description. The idea of what we're facing is unique in the most general of senses is false. But when we're in touch with universal principles, then the applications do not distract us to the point of confusion. They do not distract us to the point of dysfunction. People are always going to be power hungry. People are always going to be looking to accumulate resources. And on the other end, people are always going to be pursuing resources. People are always going to be trying to control their circumstances. But these are universals, and we should have a relationship with these factors, with these variables, that allows us to be functional in the face of adversity. You know, I've had to over the years update, modify, evolve, improve maybe how I describe what I do for men in my coaching and my philosophy, my work, my books, my programs, what have you. And I really like the idea of what I do is help men master their lives. But then it begs the question, well, what is the criteria? What is the metric maybe that we use to determine one's level of mastery? And my reply to that is autonomy. You have mastered your life when you have achieved autonomy in a sustainable way. Now, that does not mean that you're supposed to be a billionaire. It's not supposed to be, it means you're supposed to be a multimillionaire. It's not, there's no one elite level of accomplishment in any one discipline of your life that is going to give you autonomy. Rich people get divorced too. Rich people kill themselves too. Rich people get addicted to drugs too. Rich people have nervous breakdowns too. So when we look at, what is the goal of a pressured, balanced existence, it's autonomy. You don't want to get to the point where you're convincing yourself that just being apathetic, to any of the stressors that you're facing is somehow a mastery of one's life, is somehow an improvement, even in a general sense. Because that's sort of, well, if you stop feeling, you won't feel anything bad sort of philosophy and outlook. That starts to tread into nihilism. And nihilism is a defeatist outlook that's really held by pussies. This idea that there is somehow power in the cessation, in the ending of power's pursuit, is nonsense. An easy example, it's was it Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader having their second fight, I guess, where at one point, and Star Wars nerds, like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, I'm just using this in a vacuum, this example. At some point, Obi-Wan just holds his lightsaber and Darth Vader kills him. It's the idea that because he stopped fighting, he won. That's not how life is designed to be engaged. And I don't want to get too much on a fucking sidetrack here, although my brain is pulling me there. It's convenient. Let me sum it up. It's convenient that your entire life you've pushed and fought and overcome and endured and suffered and celebrated and trained and waited and struggled and rested to one day meet a level of opposition, and you conveniently adopt a philosophy of opting out. It's bullshit. Every fucking day that you wake up, you should be smiling from ear to ear, for another opportunity to fight the fucking universe again for your spot in it. Nihilism, apathy, that shit doesn't, like, I don't have any fucking room for that in my philosophy, my approach to life. So the people that get like that, it's just do what you want to do. Just do it the fuck over there. All right. Jamie says, entertainers and prostitutes, anything you want for the right price. That's right. Willie, what's up, brother man? All right, guys, let's end it there. I got out everything I wanted to and a little bit more. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. If you guys don't get my emails, I may have mentioned that a couple times during this live stream. You can go to masterchimletter.com. There's always a link in the description, no matter what platform you're watching it on. But do me a favor, do the algorithmic, liking and commenting and all that other stuff. It helps people like you find people like me, and that always helps people like me out. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next week during the Warrior stream. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.